My name is Reese Langford, 35 years old. I used to think generosity softened hard edges. Turns out, if you keep pouring into a bottomless cup, the only thing that gets softer is your spine. 3 years ago, my brother Todd called me in a panic. He said words like temporary and just a few months and I don't want Caleb on the street. He didn't ask me to wire money. He asked me to save him. So I did the biggest, dumbest, kindest thing I've ever done. I bought them a 2-bedroom condo in a decent neighborhood, cash, in my name, and I turned on all the utilities until they got back on their feet. Todd promised he'd find work. He said Caleb, his 24-year-old son, who has never clocked in for anything but a release day, was looking into community college. Promises are a currency my family spends until the ink runs. They settled like ivy, quiet at first, then everywhere. Last Tuesday, in the middle of a client call, my phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. No hello, no please, just need $2,000 for a car down payment. You'll co-sign. Full stop. I stared at the screen long enough for my coffee to cool. I typed, not happening, and felt something hard click into place when I hit send. 1 minute later, Todd called. He didn't bother with charm. It has a shorter shelf life than he does. Do it or you're out, he barked, like there was still a club I wanted membership to. Out of what? The role of their silent sponsor? The privilege of being ignored until the bill arrives? I hung up. When people think you're a faucet, the only language they understand is a valve. That night I poured a glass of wine, opened 3 tabs, gas, water, electric, and walked each one to off. No speeches, no final warning text, just a quiet end to a noise I'd funded for far too long. At 9:02 a.m., my voicemail started breeding. Todd first, furious, rehearsed expletives packed like sandbags. Then Caleb, whose favorite adjectives for women thread themselves through his vocabulary like beads on a cheap bracelet. Then Sierra, Caleb's girlfriend, tenant by osmosis, professional hanger-on, screeching about abuse and her rights in a home she never paid to breathe in. I blocked them all. My phone stopped vibrating. The air in my apartment did not. Around midnight, Jenna, a neighbor in their building who knows me well enough to use my name and not well enough to sugarcoat, texted, Hey Reese, FYI, a lot of yelling from your place tonight. Looked like someone smashed something. You okay? I wasn't, but I was done being not okay quietly. I drove over at dawn. Their door was unlocked, because of course it was. The first thing I saw were the pieces, glittering, scattered, irreparable. 6 antique vases I'd stored there for lack of space in my own place. 1 from Paris, 2 hand-painted in Italy, 1 from our grandmother, the kind that used to sit in her hallway full of lavender, so the house always smelled like summer. It takes time to shatter that many memories. It takes rage that thinks it owns the room. I stood in the doorway and let the silence crown them. I didn't cry. Might as well water a fire. I pictured the scene, Caleb pacing, spitting words he thinks make him a man, Todd half watching from the couch the way he always did when discipline would have been inconvenient, Sierra cheering like there were points for vandalism. You can live rent-free long enough that you forget whose name is on the deed. That is the rot I felt under my shoes. Their belief that this roof, these bulbs, this water, belonged to them because I made it easy to pretend. 3 years earlier, Todd had called me crying, said he'd lost his job, said just a few months, said Caleb was finding his path. I had money saved for a second property, something for me, a plan that said my life wasn't just emergencies and spreadsheets. I spent it on them. I told myself I was choosing family over square footage. I told myself it would come back. That morning, after the vases, I went home and I chose myself like oxygen. Utilities. I marked them for permanent disconnection, with notes to the providers about a property transition so no one could sweet-talk a temporary reactivation. Locksmith. I scheduled a rush visit, paid the surcharge, told him to bring a drill and a deadbolt I wouldn't regret. Lawyer. I called one I'd worked with during the pandemic, clean, efficient, allergic to drama, and explained I needed the paperwork for a fast, clean eviction, fully supported by documentation. By noon, the locks were changed. The old keys wouldn't even slide halfway in. I taped a formal notice of eviction to the door. Date, my name on the deed, a brief list of damages with photos, and a concise line at the bottom. Effective immediately. I also pinned a copy to the shared bulletin board by the mailboxes. Not for cruelty, for witnesses. People who live through the walls deserve the truth of what just happened inside them. That evening, my phone lit again. Jenna, steady as a lighthouse. They're outside the building, screaming. Caleb kicked the door. Your brother's threatening to call a lawyer. You okay? I stared at her question and realized I didn't have to lie. More than okay, I typed back, finally consistent. 2 days later, I answered a number I didn't recognize. Todd had borrowed someone else's phone. Entitlement is nothing if not resourceful. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask about the vases. You had no right, he said, the way a man says he's owed the weather. You humiliated me. You made my son homeless. I reminded him I was the owner, the payer, the HOA's favorite auto pay. I reminded him that grown men aren't evicted from homes they never paid for. They are asked to stop pretending. You'll regret this, he hissed. Maybe, I said, and hung up before his future could borrow my present. Family traveled faster than facts. Within a day, Danielle, our cousin with a spine and a memory, called to ask, carefully, if I'd really paid for the condo. When I told her everything, she was quiet for a long time and then said, he told everyone it was part of his portfolio. Within 24 hours, half the cousins knew the real story, and the other half knew there was a story they should have asked about sooner. A few tried to be Switzerland. Most texted versions of about time. I listed the condo. A good realtor took bright photos, staged ficus and clean light. 2 offers arrived within 6 days. I accepted one that was reasonable, not vindictive. Closure is a kind of price, and the market was fair that week. I thought that would be it. Turn off the lights, lock the door, sell the story to silence, and move on. But people like Todd and Caleb don't metabolize consequences. They excrete blame. When the money stops, they don't learn budgeting. They learn your schedule. It began with a summons to my manager's office and a printout of an anonymous email alleging sexist and hostile remarks I supposedly made on a video call. No dates, no names, just adjectives sweating on a page. HR asked the ritual questions, ticked the ritual boxes, closed the ritual case in 48 hours. Then a 1-star Google review of our firm appeared, my name spelled correctly, calling me unstable and unsafe around clients. It was flagged and removed before lunch, not before Mark in HR asked if someone had a personal vendetta. I said, my nephew, and watched his mouth shape the word, wow. A day later, a fake LinkedIn profile with my headshot announced that reclaiming feminine power through financial manipulation was my brand. That's when something in me went quiet and sharpened. I'd turned off their water. Now I would turn on the ledger. I opened a new spreadsheet and started the count. Every utility bill, every grocery order, the rent equivalent for 36 months, the text where temporary meant until you stop asking, and the photos of lavender shattered into glitter. I labeled a folder Langford v. Langford et al. And sent it to the attorney who never raises his voice because he never needs to. He wrote back, we'll pursue unpaid rent, reimbursements, damages, and, depending on the online mess, defamation. Calm, surgical. The opposite of the last 3 years. Night fell on a week that did not ask me for anything I didn't want to give. For the first time since I bought that condo, I slept through until morning, no alarms in my chest. The faucet was off. The valve, at last, belonged to me. The process servers moved faster than gossip. By Tuesday morning, 2 men in windbreakers were riding the elevator of Todd's favorite donut shop. By noon, a third was loitering at the Planet Fitness where Caleb pretended attendance could replace employment. But that was a day away. First came the echo, public humiliation ricocheting down a hallway I no longer owed. Reese, they're out there, again. Jenna's text buzzed at 7:14 p.m. Your brother's pacing. Caleb is kicking the door like it insulted him, and Sierra's filming. It's performative. I didn't answer. I let the scene exist without me, like a play that finally discovered it doesn't need an audience to close. Then my phone lit with a blocked number. I let it ring. It rang again. I picked up. You had no right, Todd said, skipping hello as if he'd been born mid-sentence. The fabric of his anger had new threads, humiliation and hunger. You humiliated me in front of my neighbors. You did that? I said, voice level. I changed locks on a condo I bought. I posted a legal notice. If you'd like to be humiliated privately, stop yelling in hallways. You made my son homeless. Your son is 24, I said. He made himself homeless by making himself jobless. He inhaled. I could hear the cigarette he was pretending he'd quit. You'll regret this. I glanced at the spreadsheet open on my screen, the one tallying 3 years into a single brutal number. Write it down, I said, and hung up before his regret could try on my name. By morning, my realtor had 2 showings scheduled. She sent photos of the condos scrubbed of history, the lavender stain lifted from the baseboards, the new light staging the rooms like they were waiting for better decisions. 2 offers incoming, she wrote. It's going to move. Family moved faster. Danielle called, voice low but sharp. He's been lying for years, hasn't he? Pick a unit of time, I said, and told her everything. Title, utilities, promises with no receipts, vases turned to glitter. She didn't try to deliver forgiveness to anyone. Do you want me to say anything? She asked instead. No, I said. Let the truth do its own circulation. It did. Within a day, I had 3 cousins in my messages apologizing for believing Todd's version of adulthood. One sent a voice memo that was mostly a long exhale and the words, "About time." 6 days after the listing went live, 2 offers arrived. I chose the cleaner escrow, the buyer whose emails were punctuated by politeness. When the contract hit my inbox, I signed without nostalgia, the way you sign a hospital discharge, grateful to leave walking. I thought the paperwork would end the story, but men like Todd don't believe in endings that aren't written in their handwriting. The first blow landed where I earn my rent. Can you step into my office? My manager's tone was grave, but not unfriendly. He was holding a stack of paper like it might leak. We received this, he said, and slid an anonymous email across the desk. The prose sweat, long paragraphs alleging I'd made sexist, hostile remarks during a client video meeting, that I was emotionally manipulative and unfit for leadership. No dates, no names. The diction of someone used to winning arguments by volume. I read it once and handed it back. You want my calendar? I asked. Recordings? The last 5 years of clean reviews? Mark from HR. He collects adjectives and doesn't let them breed. They did the ritual. Interviews, a polite performance of due diligence. 48 hours later, a voicemail. Closed, no findings. I filed it in the folder in my head where I keep small fires that part in the rain. The second blow was lazier, public. A 1-star Google review of our firm appeared with my name spelled correctly, always impressive, calling me unstable and unsafe around clients, ending with, "This woman shouldn't be trusted in any financial setting." It was flagged and removed before lunch, but not before Mark found me in the kitchen and asked gently, "Is this personal?" "My nephew," I said. "I evicted him from a condo I own. He's retaliating." Mark blinked, then smiled with an odd tenderness. You're the calmest person to ever say that sentence. He slid a peppermint across the counter like a secular blessing and left. That night, the third blow. A fake LinkedIn account using my headshot and a deranged bio about reclaiming feminine power through financial manipulation. The post tried for slick and landed at unhinged. Vague references to teaching clients lessons, a misquote from a TED Talk that never happened, an image of a woman's hand crushing a piggy bank under a stiletto. I reported, documented, and felt something inside me change temperature. I'd turned off their water. Now I would turn on my ledger. I pulled the receipts I'd been saving out of superstition and grief and laid them in precise rows. Gas, water, electric. 36 months, itemized. Grocery orders, dates, totals. The week Sierra complained that we don't eat packaged salad while I was standing in my own shoes. HOA assessments, emergency plumber. The stove repair after Caleb experimented with steak. The rent equivalent calculations, comparable units layered with redline notes, and in a separate folder, the lavender, the photos of my grandmother's vase in pieces, not as proof for a court so much as a consecration. This is what was broken. I labeled the master file Langford v. Langford et al. And wrote a clean email to my attorney. Unpaid rent, utility reimbursements, property destruction, also collecting defamation. He replied in under an hour, We'll file for $46,300 plus costs. Keep documenting online activity. He did not include empathy. I respected him more for that. 2 mornings later, a process server handed Todd a packet outside his donut shop, the glaze still damp on his fingers. Another found Caleb in a Planet Fitness parking lot, throwing the papers back at a man who was paid to be unflappable. Jenna sent me a photo of Todd holding the complaint like it had requested a dance. Her caption, "Portrait of a man who just met consequences." While the suit made its way through their denial and into their calendar, the background noise shifted registers. A woman with a bright voice convinced my building's front desk she was my niece and took the elevator to my floor. The receptionist, bless her spine, stopped her at the lobby with a call upstairs. "Family emergency," she said. "She needs to see Reese now." "Send her away," I said, and the words steadied something inside me I hadn't realized was still wobbling. 10 minutes later, my phone pinged with an unknown text. "Your coworkers are going to love what they see." I didn't know it yet, but this would be Sierra's specialty. Dirty pixels. She hadn't had her moment. She was about to audition for it. Before that curtain rose, there was one more ripple. A cousin sent a screenshot from a group chat I wasn't in. Todd complaining that I was destroying the family name, Caleb posting a black square with white text about fake family with dark hearts, the kind of performative nihilism that thrives on algorithms and dies in daylight. I closed my laptop and stepped onto my balcony. The city hummed the way refrigerators do in kitchens where no one is cooking. Steady, indifferent, faithful. A breeze moved through the plant I still haven't learned the name of. I thought of my grandmother's hallway and the constant lavender. I thought of turning off 3 tabs and sleeping. I thought of the number $46,300 and how sometimes justice arrives with a comma and sometimes it arrives with a lock. Inside, my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. I let it go dark on the table. The world did not end without my attention. It never had. I am only now learning to believe it. The next day would have its own spectacle. Sierra's burner account, tagged employers, doctored photos with a face that looked like mine bolted onto nightlife that isn't. But for one blessed evening, the quiet held. And in that quiet, I drew a thin line in my notebook under the word no, and below it wrote 3 others. Document. File. Proceed. Sometimes survival is a chorus. Sometimes it's a checklist. By Thursday, the civil suit had landed like a grenade. Todd was served outside his donut shop, photo evidence courtesy of Jenna, who texted me a blurry shot of him holding the papers with a stunned, open mouth, powdered sugar still clinging to his shirt. 2 hours later, Caleb was cornered in a Planet Fitness parking lot. According to the process server's notes, he hurled the envelope at the ground, cursed, then slammed himself into his car, refusing to come out until the man drove away. It should have ended there. Shock, denial, a few ranting voicemails, then silence. But silence has never been in our family's vocabulary. That evening, my receptionist called upstairs. "A young woman is here. Says she's your niece. Family emergency." I almost laughed. "I don't have a niece," I said. "Send her away." 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your coworkers are going to love what they see." I didn't understand until Jenna sent me a screenshot at 9 p.m. Sierra, smug, restless Sierra, had created a burner Instagram account called @ReeseTruthExposed. The grid was a grotesque collage, half real, half fabricated. A photo of me at a wedding reception, cropped and captioned, "Luxury parties while evicting family." Another clearly altered image with my face pasted onto a stranger's body in a nightclub, neon lights blurring behind it. Captions dripped with venom. "This woman evicts her family and then spends your money on designer cocktails." And the worst part? She tagged my employer in 3 separate posts. My stomach tightened, but my hands didn't shake. I took screenshots, every single one, cataloged the URLs, and sent them to my attorney with a short subject line. Add to case, defamation, malicious harassment. But before the ink was dry on my anger, something unexpected happened. 2 days later, Sierra was out of a job. It turns out she did have one, something at a boutique marketing agency downtown. I'd assumed she freeloaded entirely off Caleb's inertia, but apparently she was building a brand. Not anymore. One of my cousins, Danielle, maybe Jenna, maybe both, had forwarded the burner account to her employer. It traced the IP address. Within hours, Sierra was escorted out, her desk cleared by someone else's hands. That night, she texted me from another unknown number. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I was just angry. Can we talk?" I didn't respond. I forwarded it to my lawyer and went to bed. The next morning, an email popped up in my inbox from someone named Lisa. Subject line, "You don't know me, but I know Sierra." I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. Lisa turned out to be Sierra's ex-best friend, the kind who knows where the bodies are buried and still has the screenshots. Her message was short, but sharp. "I can't keep quiet. She's been bragging for weeks about ruining you. She admitted she made the fake complaint to your office, the burner account, the Google review. She and Caleb are even planning to counterclaim, say you financially exploited them, threatened to make them homeless unless they did favors. None of it's true, but she thinks she can twist the story." Attached were receipts, text chains of Sierra gloating, a voice memo where she laughed about how easy it is to make someone look guilty if you have no paper trail, and a screenshot of Caleb writing, "We'll flip it on her. Say she controlled us with money." I sat there in my kitchen, dawn light cutting the counter into harsh stripes, scrolling through the evidence. Each line wasn't just petty, it was ammunition. Ammunition I hadn't even asked for. Evidently, some enemies destroy themselves faster than you ever could. I saved everything into my folder, Langford v. Langford et al. Exhibit C, and whispered to no one in particular, "Thank you, Lisa." For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something close to power, not the kind my brother craved, loud and brittle, but the kind that comes from knowing the truth is finally written in ink. And yet, a part of me knew they weren't done. People like Todd and Caleb don't stop at failure. They dig deeper, hoping the hole will scare you before it buries them. The courthouse didn't look like the kind of place where a 3-year war should end. No sweeping staircases, no gavel echoing like thunder, just fluorescent lights that hummed too loud, scuffed tile floors, and a room full of strangers all waiting for their names to be called like patients at a clinic. I walked in with my lawyer and a folder heavy enough to bend the clasp of my bag. Every receipt, every bill, every photograph. A ledger of 3 years, where I'd been the only adult in a family that thrived on pretending. Todd was already there, slumped in a chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His weight loss wasn't discipline, it was stress, hunger, maybe shame, though I doubted it. He didn't meet my eyes. Caleb followed behind, swaggering in sneakers bright enough to blind and a hoodie pulled low like he was showing up for a basketball game, not a civil suit. He smirked at me once, like this was all still a performance he could win with attitude. Sierra was nowhere to be seen. Cowards know when not to show. When the case was called, my lawyer stood calm, precise, flipping through tabs like a conductor tuning an orchestra. First, he dropped the subpoenaed bank records. 2 years ago, Todd begged me for $7,500 for Caleb's trade school tuition. I'd wired it, labeling the transfer tuition support. But the bank trail told the truth. Within a week, $2,000 at a gaming store, $9,800 on sneakers. The rest bled into hotels and restaurants. Then came the Tahoe receipts. An Uber drop-off at Tahoe Dream Inn, room 241. That same weekend, Sierra had posted a photo on Instagram, cocktail glasses on a balcony, the exact railing visible in the Uber receipt. She'd deleted it later, but Jenna had screenshotted it. My lawyer laid it on the judge's desk like a card no one could trump. Todd's lawyer tried the usual script, said I gave the money willingly, that I was weaponizing generosity, that this was really about a sibling feud, not damages. The judge barely glanced up. Then Caleb decided to open his mouth. He leaned forward and said, loud enough for the back row to hear, "She promised me the condo, said if I proved myself, it'd be mine. She's just bitter I called her bluff." It was almost funny. Almost. Because 2 years ago, I had texted Todd directly. "This condo is temporary. I bought it to help, not to give it away. It stays in my name." My lawyer slid the printout forward, complete with timestamp, property deed, and utility bills all in my name. Caleb's lie deflated in seconds. And then came the coup de grace. My lawyer handed the judge a notarized affidavit, Lisa's. Sierra's ex-best friend had signed her name beneath a statement detailing the burner Instagram, the fake HR complaint, the planned false police report. Attached were screenshots, voice memos, timestamps, every malicious scheme laid bare. The judge actually raised his eyebrows. He looked at Todd, then at me, then back at the stack of papers. The silence in that room was thick enough to chew. Judgment in favor of the plaintiff, he said finally. Full amount, $46,300, plus court costs, plus damages. He flipped another page. A civil harassment injunction is recommended pending a separate hearing. Defendants are prohibited from contacting Ms. Langford directly. That was it. No drama, no shouting. Just the sound of a gavel tapping once and a lifetime of weight shifting from my shoulders onto theirs. Todd stood slowly, his face drained. Caleb didn't even look at me. They shuffled out like men leaving a funeral, except the coffin they'd buried was their own credibility. As I gathered my papers, my lawyer leaned toward me. You won, Reese, but keep your locks changed. Men like that sometimes look for one last stupid act. I nodded, sliding the affidavit back into my folder. I didn't think they'd be foolish enough to test me again. But I was wrong. Less than 48 hours later, at 2:30 a.m., I woke to a sound outside my apartment door. A scraping, metallic, rhythmic. A whisper, two voices muffled low. My heart raced, but my hands were steady. I didn't shout. I didn't move toward the door. I walked quietly to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and called building security. Then I called the police. 9 minutes later, sirens cut through the night. When the officers arrived, they caught it all on the hallway cameras. Caleb crouched by my lock with a cheap pick set clutched in his gloved hands, Todd standing behind him like a lookout who thought patience made him wise. My interior camera caught their whispers too. Caleb muttering curses, Todd telling him to hurry. They tried to lie, of course, said they were just checking in on their sister. One officer asked flatly, "Is this how you normally visit family?" Then they cuffed them both for attempted unlawful entry. I didn't even need to press charges. The arrest was enough. Enough to humiliate them, enough to brand them with mugshots that Danielle texted me before dawn. Caleb's hoodie twisted, Todd's eyes glassy and small. Sierra dumped Caleb that weekend in a dramatic Instagram story about protecting her peace. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 days later, Todd left a voicemail on my work line. His voice was hoarse, bitter. You didn't have to go this far. Family doesn't destroy family. I listened once, then deleted it. Because he never understood the truth. I didn't destroy anyone. I just stopped paying for their survival. 2 months of quiet followed the arrest. It was the kind of quiet that almost made me suspicious, like the air before a storm. I moved into a smaller apartment, one with a balcony that caught the evening light and floors that didn't creak under my bare feet. I bought new locks, set up extra cameras, and for the first time in years, I slept with my phone on silent. Then, one afternoon, I opened my mailbox and saw it, an envelope with my name scrawled in Todd's messy handwriting. No return address. For a moment, I considered tearing it in half right there, but curiosity is a stubborn thing. Inside was a 2-page letter. The first few lines read like an apology, phrases about mistakes made, about family bonds fraying. But by the second paragraph, the words twisted. He claimed he had recordings of conversations from back when I helped him financially, recordings that, in his words, told a different story. He didn't say what they contained, just dangled the implication. Then came the line that stopped me cold. You may have won in court, but if I go public, you'll lose everything that matters. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat dressed in cursive. I scanned the letter, made a digital copy, and sent it straight to my lawyer. The next day he called, calm as ever. It's vague, not actionable yet, he said. But if he actually has recordings without consent, that's his legal risk, not yours. Keep everything. Still, it unsettled me. Why now? Why risk writing this after months of silence? That weekend, I got my answer. Danielle forwarded me a screenshot of a GoFundMe page. The title, Help Us Start Over. A family wrongfully torn apart. The photo, Todd and Caleb standing solemnly in front of a beat-up sedan. The description was a masterclass in distortion. They painted themselves as victims of a wealthy family member who had illegally evicted them and weaponized the legal system. They admitted to the court case, but twisted it into a morality play where I was the villain, punishing them for refusing to grovel. The fundraising goal? $50,000. And people, strangers who knew nothing, were donating. I wasn't furious about the money. I was furious about the narrative. Todd and Caleb had found one more stage, one more angle to exploit, one more platform where truth didn't matter if the story made people feel something. I called my lawyer again. He suggested a cease and desist, maybe another defamation claim. But as I stared at that GoFundMe page, something inside me shifted. I was tired of playing defense. This time I wasn't just going to shut them down quietly. I was going to end the story they were writing about me, publicly, and on my terms. I sat at my desk with Todd's letter on one side and the GoFundMe page glowing on the other. The lies stacked so high they almost looked like truth. For years I'd been dragged into their story as the villain, the wallet, the obstacle. This time, I decided I'd be the narrator. I drafted a post, not for drama, but for clarity. It wasn't the kind of furious rant that evaporates in an hour. It was methodical, measured, a ledger dressed in sentences. I began with a photo of the eviction notice taped to the condo door. Beneath it, I wrote, 3 years ago, I bought this condo in my name to keep my brother and his son off the street. I paid the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and HOA fees. They never paid me a cent. Then came the receipts. Redacted bank statements showing the transfers, the wire-labeled tuition support, the subpoenaed records that proved where the money really went, screenshots of Todd texting, just temporary, sis, and Caleb messaging, need 2K, you'll co-sign. I blurred numbers and account details, but left enough to be undeniable. At the end, I wrote, boundaries are not cruelty. Accountability is not abuse. Family doesn't mean turning yourself into a lifeline until you drown. It means honesty, respect, and contribution. Those were never offered to me. The courts agreed, and still, the lies continue. This is my side, documented. I didn't tag the GoFundMe. I didn't name them outright. But the timing, the evidence, the tone, it all spoke louder than any hashtag. Within hours, messages began trickling in. A cousin I hadn't heard from in years. I owe you an apology. I believe Todd. I shouldn't have. Jenna, the neighbor, posted a comment of her own. I live in the building. I saw the yelling, the damage. Reese is telling the truth. Even Lisa, Sierra's ex-friend, added a quiet note beneath the thread. I gave evidence under oath. Everything she says is true. By nightfall, the GoFundMe link had been quietly set to inactive. I didn't gloat, I just screenshotted the change and added it to my growing digital archive labeled The Ledger. The next morning, HR sent me a message. We've seen your post. Thank you for your transparency. Please know you have our full support. That was when I realized something profound. Todd and Caleb had tried to ruin me at work, online, in whispers. But the truth, once set down in ink, had not just protected me, it had pulled others into the light. And then almost predictably came one last voicemail from Todd. His voice was thin, almost hollow. Reese, I read your post. I didn't think you'd really do it. You've embarrassed us beyond repair. I don't even know if I can show my face anymore, but He stopped, then sighed. Forget it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a threat. It was the sound of a man realizing his last story had finally lost its audience. I didn't call back. I saved the voicemail in the ledger and closed the folder. That night, I stood on my balcony, lavender-scented candle burning, the city hum steady beneath me. For the first time in years, my story wasn't something I had to defend. It was mine, written, undeniable. And that was the ending Todd never thought I'd choose, the ending where his words didn't matter anymore. In the days that followed, the silence around me was different. It wasn't the loaded kind, the silence before a voicemail tirade, or the pause on the phone before Todd spat another threat. This was a quieter quiet, one that hummed with the absence of their control. Family that had once kept me at arm's length began reaching out. Danielle called, and for the first time in years, she didn't sound like she was choosing sides. I should have known, she said, voice heavy. When Todd bragged about that condo, I wanted to believe him. I didn't think he'd lie like that to all of us. But your post... She trailed off. You gave us proof we can't ignore. Another cousin messaged late at night. We all thought you were harsh. Turns out you were the only one protecting yourself. I'm sorry. Even Jenna's niece, a teenager I barely knew, left a comment under my post. Reading this made me start saving for my own place. Thanks for showing that boundaries don't mean you don't love people. Their words weren't absolution. They weren't meant to heal, but they were a reminder that truth, once written down, doesn't stay still. It moves, it ripples, it changes the way people see what they've always accepted. Meanwhile, Todd and Caleb vanished from public view. The GoFundMe shut down without explanation. Their accounts went private. The loudest voices in the room had been silenced not by shouting them down, but by laying out receipts and letting the facts echo louder than lies. But endings in my family have always been slippery things. 2 weeks later, a plain envelope arrived at my new apartment. No name, no return address, just my handwriting from childhood staring back at me, Todd's blocky scrawl. Inside was nothing more than a single sentence scribbled in black ink: "Family doesn't give up on family." It should have shaken me. Once it would have. But instead, I slipped the page into the ledger folder with all the others, a relic of a story that no longer dictated mine. That night, HR sent me one more note. "We've closed all internal reviews. We support you completely. Thank you for trusting us with the truth." And when I set my phone down, face down on the table, and stepped onto my balcony, I realized what I was feeling wasn't vigilance anymore. It wasn't fear. It was peace. Not the kind that's handed to you. Not the kind that comes from making everyone else comfortable, but the kind you carve out yourself, paper by paper, boundary by boundary, until the ledger finally balances. The injunction was finalized 2 weeks later, signed, stamped, legally binding. If Todd or Caleb so much as texted me, it could move from civil to criminal. For the first time in years, I didn't have to wonder if the next vibration in my pocket was going to be a demand, a guilt trip, or a threat. I bought myself one new vase, not glass, not fragile, heavy brushed steel, unbreakable. I filled it with lavender, like my grandmother always did, and set it by the window. Not as a replacement for what they shattered, but as a reminder that some things don't need to be delicate to be beautiful. In my spare hours, I began drafting something I'd never thought I'd need, a personal boundary plan. It wasn't dramatic, just practical. My lawyer's number printed and taped inside a kitchen cabinet, a checklist for documenting harassment, a spare set of locks in my closet, notes to myself that read like prayers. Document, don't explain. No is a full sentence. You don't owe anyone silence. One evening, as I was finishing dinner, I opened my inbox to find a message from Jenna. Attached was a photo her niece had drawn, a girl standing in front of a house with lavender in the windowsill. At the bottom, written in shaky penmanship, "I'm saving for my own place. I want to be strong like you." I stared at it until my vision blurred. That was the moment I realized the truth. This entire war, every broken vase, every fake review, every sleepless night, it hadn't been about winning against Todd or Caleb. It was about reclaiming myself. And in the process, maybe showing someone younger that survival doesn't mean bending until you break. It means standing, even when standing makes you the villain in someone else's story. The cousins stopped calling. The GoFundMe disappeared completely. Todd and Caleb became whispers, the kind of cautionary tale people tell at barbecues when they're deciding which relatives to trust. Sierra vanished into her own wreckage, leaving behind only screenshots of her own arrogance. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Bills still arrived, work was still demanding, but it was mine. My bills, my work, my name, no longer twisted through someone else's narrative. Sometimes, late at night, I'd play Todd's last voicemail, the one where his voice cracked between rage and defeat. Not because I needed to hear it, but because it reminded me he had every chance. They both did. And they lost not because I destroyed them, but because they refused to stop destroying themselves. On my balcony, with the lavender swaying faintly in the breeze, I finally understood what closure really felt like. It wasn't loud. It wasn't triumphant. It was a deep, steady breath that no one else could take from me. And this time the quiet wasn't empty. It was freedom.